Well met, lords and ladies, Jacob Butter speaking. Today I am covering a topic that is of extreme interest to me in the MyStreet community. I don't know if I'm quite prepared to make this yet, but as the series is going on, I'm trying to pick out different bits, like I say before, that may not be ever confirmed by the actual creators themselves. That being said, my last theory was on a concept that probably will be confirmed or denied by the creators themselves, but that was because that was a particular topic that people had asked about. This is one that intrigues me almost as much as Travis, and it kind of has the same principle to it, because it's all to do with the mind. If you think about it, in terms of MyStreet, the main thing that stands out are the characters. And the reason they stand out is because they have all got defined personalities. And personalities, of course, come from the brain. So that's, I guess, why I'm so interested in the psyche of all of these characters. Even the ones that supposedly weren't actually animate objects. Hence, we go to our topic of discussion today. The Plush, also known as Woof. You might think I'm making this theory too soon about Woof. We've got kind of a good amount of information as to how Woof supposedly operates and how she develops a personality, and also what kind of personality of her own she was designated to begin with. So with that being said, let us go from the beginning. So Woof, as we find out in episode 2 of A Wolf Tale, is a a present from Derek to Aaron originally, before she eventually became a present from Aaron to Aphmau. However, we don't know anything about Woof before that, nor do I imagine that we will, because I reckon that the description that Jess and Jason want us to have of Woof is that Derek simply purchased Woof as an innocent gift because he might have thought, hey, there's a wolf plush over there. Let's go ahead and give that to my son, who is literally afraid of wolves. Kind of makes sense. However, as I was saying originally, we don't know anything about how Woof was fabricated, for example. I did actually just research now a little bit about Derek to see if there were any clues. And obviously we all know that Derek is the CEO of Lycan Corporation, but we don't actually know what Lycan Corporation does. It's an odd detail that's never really been explained. I feel like, people just assume that it's, oh yes, it's business. Kind of like the Remave Corporation is just business. There's nothing really to talk about what kind of business that those are, either of them, which is kind of odd. You think that maybe, I don't know, they feel like it's too complex to talk about, and actually talk about, the nuances of what actually goes on in those businesses. But you would imagine that, they'd be quite good at that, given that, they own a business, Blue Jay Studios, but it's odd. That's all I'm saying, is that it's an odd detail that's been missing, unless it's got some sort of relevance later, because it's one of the things that, Aphmau never really asks about, because Aaron obviously doesn't want to be involved in that business, because there's a lot of tension with his family. Maybe there's something in season 6 about that, when Aphmau is going to mention something to do with or someone's going to say to her, Aphmau, you don't actually know what the business does, right? I've just realized you have no idea what we actually do. Something along those lines. I don't know. There are possibilities of what they do. The Lycan Corporation could, for example, have dealt in potions. They could have done that until they realized about, how forever potions were tearing them apart. At which point they would have thought, you are tearing me apart, Michael, and then decided not to do it. Although, that wouldn't explain how they're still so successful and rich to this day. Because clearly, the business is still in operation as of Starlight, so something still must be going on. Although, what if, and this is probably factually incorrect, but what if they at one point dealt in toy fabrication? Or, I don't know, have some sort of merch line? Again, kind of would align with Blue Jay Studios a little bit there. It could be that Woof was actually from Lycan Corporation's own merch line, and as we know, Lycan is very reminiscent of the fact that obviously the business owners are werewolves, because Lycan was the original werewolf in Greek mythology. So it makes sense to have this kind of connection aligned to whatever their company does. Even if they don't actually have anything to do with wolves, and I sincerely doubt that they are because of Derek and Rachel's attitude towards wolves, which is very justified. This is actually a more popular marketing technique than you might think. Insurance comparison site CompareTheMarket.com has taken advantage of the fact that there's a site, a similarity in their name to CompareTheMeerkat.com, and they've used that excuse to have meerkats as their company mascot. The company they have had all these different toy lines of different meerkats in the past, eventually selecting 2 to be their main mascots, kind of maybe 3 if you count Oleg. But they're instantly recognizable. And what do? They're an insurance comparison site. That's what they do. But their main marketing technique is to offer toys to people who use their website. You will have maybe even limited edition toys, or they're the toys that they would give you for just comparing insurance on their website. And it used to be that the first time you use their website, you get 1 toy, and then there was up to 5 different toys that you could get, all just for using that one website. So it's quite plausible that the Lycans might have used the similarity in their name and made a merch line from that. And it's quite possible that Woof was part of this merch line. It's quite possible that, if Woof is indeed tied to the Lycan Corporation, and the Lycan Corporation at one point tied with forever potions, that Woof has something supernatural about her. And I definitely think that Woof has something supernatural about her. But I don't believe it's to do with forever potions. A lot of people make that link when associating the Lycans and everything that happened in Season 4 / teeny bit of 5, but I don't think it's to do with potions this time. I think it's to do with what I mentioned at the beginning of this video, the brain. I think that whatever kind of magic Woof has been infused by is purely cerebral. A bit, like I said before, a bit like what happened with Travis and the memory spell and everything that I commented on my first theory, except not quite the same. I don't think Jean was involved in this case, because Jean was the child at this point. But I do think that it's quite possible that other people have adapted some kind of cerebral magic, which is what I'm going to dub it actually now, cerebral magic. So, of course, you might be aware of the kind of idea that, with witchcraft there are such things as poppets, that once they're used on someone you can effectively affect someone else. Usually poppets are more of a physical object, like, for example, the traditional view of it is that if you stab a poppet with a needle, the person that it's meant to look like actually gets a wound in whichever position the poppet has been jabbed with a needle. This isn't to say that Woof has some kind of physical connection to her owner or her previous owners, because otherwise they would have contracted serious harm. Although we all know that no one contracts any form of harm unless the plot demands it. That being said, I do think that Woof, having been infused with cerebral magic, is effectively linked through her owners through the brain. When we're first introduced to Woof, you imagine that she has she is being made to talk by Aphmau. It's hinted because Jess does the voice for Woof as well as for Aphmau, and it sounds like a cartoonish version of Jess. And that kind of makes sense. Sylvana kind of teases at this fact as well, and kind of makes her own manifestation of these things. I do think that those aren't infused with cerebral magic. I think that's just a joke. So let's just discard that. As for Woof, we do gradually see that Woof has a lot of insight into Aphmau. Fans originally speculated that Woof was just something Aphmau had, formulated from her own mind, and that's kind of true. But I think that it's also whatever Woof has been infused by that is playing a factor in this. I don't think it's just purely Aphmau conjuring up her own personal therapist, essentially, because Woof does tease Aphmau quite a bit and is able to feel guilt and have different, emotions and whatever. And it's these kind of defining characteristics that I think differentiate Woof from Aphmau. For example, when Woof has gone too far in teasing Aphmau and actually making Aphmau cry, then Woof eventually feels guilt and tries to make her feel better, a lot of the time successfully. This is why I don't think Woof is purely Aphmau's formulated companion, because no formulated companion makes someone cry. You wouldn't want somebody who's already feeling bad about something or is already tense about something to cry and feel even worse. That's not the purpose. What I do think is that Woof, from her sense of duty to her girl, in this case, is able to become like a sort of a voice in Aphmau's head, because no one else actually hears Woof, and provide essential counselling for her or essential advice, kind of acting just the same way that a best friend would. Yes, Aphmau has given Woof the life that she has currently, but Woof also has some form of life to begin with. Woof did not have the same voice as before, I don't believe so. And the reason that I don't believe so is because of what happens again in episode 2. But of course, this is obviously Aaron making Woof talk. I think that that's what happened before. I think that Woof and Aaron had this connection before it was eventually severed by distance and separated over time. Season 6 might prove this wrong, I don't know. But for now, it's safe to assume that Aaron and Woof's connection was very similar to Aphmau and Woof's connection currently. And that's why Aaron makes Woof talk, because Woof also had Aaron's own voice from his head when he would interact with her. And also that kind of makes sense, because when you're a child and you're playing with toys, when you're voicing a female character, you automatically put on a slightly higher pitched voice than before. The one thing that I don't understand is why Woof doesn't actually know Aphmau's name. Because Woof has formed a connection that lots of telepaths would be so jealous of, but doesn't actually refer to Aphmau as Aphmau, simply refers to her as my girl.
This is my girl.
That still baffles me. I think it may be because Aphmau doesn't, think a lot while she's around Woof. She doesn't think a lot and say, my name is Aphmau. And obviously this connection is again stimulated by proximity, as cerebral magic is, if you follow my first theory on Travis. Because obviously Woof still has to ask Aphmau what's going on, and doesn't instinctively know what is on her mind, and indeed who is on her mind. Which again highlights the fact that Woof has some sort of autonomy. If you didn't follow the fact that, she has defined facial expressions in Season 5 and in Falcon Claw University, she still is able to talk. But the last point to address is the fact that people seem to believe that Woof is always coming to life when Aphmau feels isolated from Aaron. I don't think she always knew that she was so isolated from Aaron, because especially in Falcon Claw University, when they hadn't supposedly talked for 3 years, and yet she was so shocked to finally hear Wolf's voice once again. You would think that by that point she'd reconnected with Aaron. By that point they were already talking, they was playing their game once more, everything was kind of going back to normal. And she doesn't know about Jenny, so that isolation wouldn't be there. So that idea put together by the fans doesn't make sense, I'm sorry to say. Aaron isn't the sole connection to do with Wolf, although he is the person who Wolf would most associate with, apart from Aphmau, given that Wolf is indeed previously owned by Aaron. And that's again how cerebral magic works. But let me know what you think about this. I think it's a very interesting concept, and I want to see more of Wolftail be developed as it normally is, but I kind of want more hints about this, because this is a topic I wanted to address for a while. Again, like most of my theories, I just didn't have the necessary means to do it until Wolftail came out. And on that note, until next time, farewell.